Nanny number 17 fled down the snow-covered driveway at 6:47 a.m., mascara streaking her face, designer coat forgotten in her haste to escape. Three identical 7-year-old boys watched from the mansion's frost-etched window, their expressions blank as winter itself. 9 months had passed since their mother's car skidded off Route 82 during that December blizzard. 9 months since Catherine Thornton's funeral. 9 months since anything in the Thornton estate felt remotely like home. William Thornton stood in the shadows of his study, phone pressed against his temple, listening to his mother-in-law's voice slice through the early morning silence. "The custody hearing is in 14 days, William. 14 days to prove you're capable, which we both know you're not." He hung up without answering. By 7:15 a.m., a battered Honda Civic pulled through the iron gates. Grace Mitchell emerged, breath clouding in the mountain air, taking in the Gothic mansion that locals whispered about. The house where 3 demon children lived, where nannies went to have their spirits broken. She'd read the warnings. She came anyway. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Thornton family had once been Aspen's golden portrait of success. William Thornton, 38 years old, had built Thornton Safety Systems from a garage startup into a $2 billion empire manufacturing protective equipment for industrial workers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who made millions keeping workers safe couldn't protect his own wife from a winter road. Catherine Thornton had been more than the pretty face at charity galas. As chief financial officer of her husband's company, she'd possessed a razor-sharp mind for numbers and an even sharper instinct for corporate malfeasance. She died on March 15th, leaving behind 3 sons who looked so identical that even their father sometimes called them by the wrong names. Ethan, the eldest by 4 minutes, had appointed himself commander of their small army. He wore his mother's absence like armor, speaking in clipped sentences, organizing his brother's rebellion with military precision. Mason, born second, tried desperately to be perfect, the good son who might somehow rewind time through flawless behavior. Lucas, the youngest, had retreated into silence, communicating primarily through drawings that grew darker with each passing week. William hadn't handled widowhood with grace. The CEO, who once commanded boardrooms with confidence, now struggled to make breakfast without burning toast. He'd hired nanny after nanny, each one lasting shorter than the last. They quit for various reasons: paint in their hair, car tires slashed, valuable items mysteriously broken. But the real reason was always the same. They couldn't bear the weight of so much concentrated grief. Enter Victoria Ashford, 68, widow of pharmaceutical magnate Robert Ashford, mother of 2 daughters, one dead for 20 years, one dead for 9 months. She lived alone in a sprawling estate 30 minutes down the mountain, rattling around in rooms filled with photographs of people who'd stopped aging. Her attorney had filed custody papers because she genuinely believed those boys needed saving. What she couldn't admit, even to herself, was that she needed them more. Grace Mitchell arrived at the Thornton estate carrying everything she owned in 2 suitcases and a grief so profound it had its own gravity. At 35, she looked simultaneously younger and older than her years, smooth skin over haunted eyes. 3 years earlier, she'd been Grace Henderson, wife to David, mother to Lily. Now she was just Grace, a woman who'd learned that the past tense of have is had, and that single word could destroy you. Grace's first morning began at 7 a.m. sharp, when William Thornton opened the front door looking like a man who'd forgotten how to sleep. His expensive suit hung incorrectly, tie askew, and even from 3 feet away, Grace could smell whiskey despite the early hour. His eyes, gray as the winter sky, flickered over her with exhausted assessment. "Miss Mitchell, you're punctual." His voice carried the gravel of too many cigarettes or too much screaming, or both. "I should warn you before you come inside. My sons are grieving," Grace finished quietly. "I read the file. The file doesn't capture it." William stepped aside, gesturing her into a foyer that belonged in an architectural magazine. Marble floors, sweeping staircase, chandelier dripping crystal. "They've broken everyone else. 17 women in 9 months. Some lasted days." One lasted 47 minutes. Grace set down her suitcases. "Mr. Thornton, I'm not here to be unbreakable. I'm here to be present." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or the faint stirring of hope he'd learned not to trust. He led her through the house, past photographs that tracked a family's disintegration. Recent pictures showed a stunning blonde woman with laugh lines and kind eyes. Catherine Thornton had the look of someone who'd never expected to die young. The boys' room is upstairs. 3 beds, though they rarely sleep in them anymore. They've taken to camping out in... William paused at the sound of footsteps. Here they come. 3 boys materialized at the top of the staircase, like a jury rendering verdict. Identical faces, identical dark hair, identical expressions of cold assessment. They descended in formation, Ethan in front, Mason and Lucas flanking, wearing matching pajamas and matching suspicion. "You can't make us like you," Ethan announced. His voice carried authority beyond his 7 years. "We don't want another nanny. We want our mama." Mason and Lucas nodded in unison, small soldiers awaiting orders. Their faces were streaked with what might have been tears or might have been deliberate dirt. Grace couldn't tell which would be worse. Grace knelt slowly, bringing herself to their eye level. The marble floor bit cold through her jeans. "I know you miss your mama, and I'm not here to replace her. Nobody could ever replace her." "Then why are you here?" Mason's voice wavered, caught between aggression and genuine curiosity. "I'm here because I think you need someone who understands what it feels like when your world falls apart." Grace kept her voice soft, steady. "And maybe I need that too." Lucas, the silent one, stepped forward suddenly. He thrust a piece of paper toward Grace, a drawing rendered in crayon with disturbing precision. It showed a car, twisted metal, a road that curved like a scar. Blood pooled in careful red strokes. In the corner, a small figure watched. "Did you draw this?" Grace asked gently. Lucas nodded once, eyes enormous. "Were you there?" Another nod. Grace felt William stiffen behind her, heard his sharp intake of breath. Apparently, this was news to him too. She studied the drawing more carefully. The specific angle of the wreckage, the detail of the intersection, the watching child rendered so small he was almost invisible. "This must have been very scary," Grace said. Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "It's okay to be scared. It's okay to remember. And it's okay to show people what you remember." Grace carefully folded the drawing and handed it back. "Will you show me more of your pictures sometime?" Lucas hesitated, then nodded again. Ethan crossed his arms, unimpressed by this display of gentleness. "You're just pretending. Everyone pretends to be nice, and then they leave." "You're right," Grace said. "I might leave, but I'll tell you the truth. I'm going to try really hard to stay. That's all I can promise." "Promises don't mean anything," Mason whispered. "Mama promised she'd be right back." The grief in that small voice could have split mountains. "Your mama didn't break her promise on purpose," Grace said. "Sometimes terrible things happen that nobody planned or wanted. That doesn't mean she didn't love you more than anything in the world." "How do you know?" Ethan demanded. "You didn't even know her." Grace pulled up her sleeves slowly, revealing burn scars that roped up her forearms in angry pink ridges. The boys stared. "I had a little girl once. Her name was Lily. She was 5 years old." Grace's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "There was a fire. I tried to reach her. I couldn't. So I know what it's like to lose someone you die to protect." The silence stretched taut as wire. "Did she die?" Mason asked in a tiny voice. "Yes." "Do you miss her?" "Every single day." Lucas reached out and touched one of Grace's scars with a fingertip. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that Grace had to blink back tears. "We should probably test you now," Ethan announced, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "That's what we do. We test people." "That's fair," Grace said. "How about we have breakfast first, and then you can test me all you want?" William cleared his throat. "Miss Mitchell, I should show you the kitchen. There was an incident last night." The kitchen looked like a war zone. Flour covered every surface. Broken eggs congealed on the floor. Someone had written "Go away" in syrup on the refrigerator. Grace surveyed the damage without comment. "I can clean this," she said. "Or," Ethan said from the doorway, watching her carefully, "you could quit like everyone else." Grace found the mop, bucket, dish soap. "Do you boys like pancakes?" By the time the kitchen was clean and pancakes were bubbling on the griddle, something had shifted. Mason asked if he could help flip them. Lucas drew at the kitchen table, occasionally glancing up at Grace with cautious interest. Even Ethan relaxed incrementally, drawn by the smell of food and the novelty of an adult who cleaned up messes without complaint or accusation. They were eating, Grace, William, and 3 boys who suddenly seemed more like children than soldiers, when the doorbell rang. William's face darkened immediately. "That'll be Victoria," he muttered, standing. "Right on schedule." The woman who swept into the kitchen radiated cold authority. Victoria Ashford wore her wealth like armor, tailored coat, perfect hair, jewelry that cost more than Grace's car. Her eyes, the same blue as Catherine's in the photographs, swept over the scene with razor assessment. "William." No warmth in the greeting. Then her gaze landed on Grace. "And who is this? Number 18? "Victoria, this is Grace Mitchell." "Grace?" "Catherine's mother, Victoria Ashford." "Mrs. Ashford." Grace stood, offering her hand. Victoria's handshake was brief, cold. "How long do you think you'll last, Miss Mitchell?" The agency must have lowered their standards considerably. "Grandmother," Mason looked stricken. "I'm here to see my grandsons, not exchange pleasantries with the latest temporary help." Victoria's attention shifted to the boys. "Get your coats. We're going to lunch." "Actually," William said quietly, "they're having lunch. Grace made pancakes." Pancakes. Victoria's tone could have frozen water. "How domestic." "William, we need to speak. Privately." Grace immediately stood. "Boys, why don't you show me the rest of the house while your father and grandmother talk?" She herded the children out quickly, but not before hearing Victoria's voice rise in anger. "Another one, William. How many nannies before you admit you can't do this alone?" Upstairs, away from the argument, Lucas tugged at Grace's sleeve. He pointed to a closed door at the end of the hallway. "What's in there?" Grace asked. "Mama's office," Ethan said. "Daddy keeps it locked. Nobody goes in." "He sits in there sometimes," Mason added. "At night. We hear him crying." Grace felt her heart crack slightly. "That must be hard to hear." "We cry too," Mason admitted, "but we try to be quiet." The house, Grace realized, was full of people crying in separate rooms, each trying not to burden the others with the weight of their grief. It was the loneliest thing she'd ever encountered. Downstairs, the argument escalated. Victoria's voice carried clearly. "Custody hearing in 2 weeks, and I will prove you're unfit." Ethan's face went pale. "Is grandmother taking us away?" "I don't know," Grace said honestly, "but I know your daddy loves you very much." "And so does your grandmother, even if she shows it in confusing ways." "She thinks Daddy killed Mama," Lucas said suddenly, the first complete sentence Grace had heard from him. She said it. We heard her. Before Grace could respond, a crash echoed from downstairs. They ran to find William standing amid the shattered remains of a lamp, Victoria frozen in the doorway, and between them, a tension so thick it was almost visible. "Get out," William said quietly. "Get out of my house, Victoria." "This isn't over." Victoria's voice shook with barely controlled fury. 2 weeks, William, and then we'll see who those boys really belong to." She left like a storm departing, and in her wake, William sank into a chair and put his head in his hands. The boys stood frozen, frightened by their father's collapse. Grace made a decision. "Boys, upstairs, now. Your father needs a moment." Surprisingly, they obeyed. Once they were gone, Grace knelt beside William. "Mr. Thornton, she thinks I killed Catherine," he said without looking up. "She thinks I called her out in that storm, that I'm responsible for—" His voice broke. "Are you?" He looked up sharply, and Grace met his gaze steadily. No, he said finally, but I've spent 9 months wondering if she's right. That night, after the boys finally fell asleep in a nest of blankets they'd built in Ethan's room, Grace found Lucas's bedroom and studied the walls. Every inch was covered with drawings, the same intersection, the same twisted car, the same small figure watching. Hundreds of them, obsessively detailed, a child's attempt to process horror his mind couldn't quite contain. She was still standing there when William appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I should have seen it," he said quietly, offering her one. "He's been drawing that scene for months. I thought it was just his way of remembering her. I didn't realize he'd witnessed it. He needs to talk to someone, a trauma specialist." Grace accepted the tea, grateful for its warmth. "Children shouldn't carry this alone." "I know, I've tried. He won't speak to therapists, won't speak to anyone really, except apparently you." William studied her face in the dim hallway light. "What you said this morning about your daughter, was that true?" "Every word." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't pry, it's just—" He stopped, struggling with words. "How do you live with it? The guilt?" Grace took a long sip of tea before answering. "Badly, most days. Some days I don't want to live with it at all." She met his eyes. "But then I remember that Lily wouldn't want me to stop living, that the best way to honor her is to keep going, to help other children who are hurting. It doesn't make the guilt go away. It just gives it somewhere useful to go." William was quiet for a long moment. Catherine was going to meet someone that night, not picking up an anniversary gift. That was a lie, I told myself. Told the police. Told everyone. She was scared. Said she'd discovered something at work. Something dangerous. I told her to handle it in the morning, but she insisted it couldn't wait. So I let her go. In a blizzard. I let my wife drive into a storm because I was too tired to argue. The confession hung between them, raw and painful. "What did she discover?" Grace asked. "I don't know. She died before she could tell me. The police ruled it an accident. Black ice, poor visibility. Her car went off the road at mile marker 47. Lucas must have been on the phone with her, or somehow listening. I've never been able to get him to tell me." Grace thought of those obsessive drawings, the specific details only an eyewitness could know. "Mr. Thornton, has anyone thoroughly investigated the accident?" Why would they? It was just a winter storm tragedy. Happens every year in these mountains. Before Grace could respond, a sound made them both turn. Lucas stood in the hallway, clutching his drawing pad, eyes wide and frightened. How much had he heard? "Hey, sweetheart," Grace said gently. "Can't sleep?" Lucas shook his head. He opened his drawing pad to a fresh page, one Grace hadn't seen before. This one showed 2 cars, Catherine's sedan and something else, something larger. "Lucas?" William's voice was very quiet. "Was there another car?" The boy's nod was almost imperceptible. "Did the other car hit Mama's car?" Another nod. "On purpose?" Lucas's face crumpled, and he began to cry, the silent, shaking kind of tears that hurt to witness. Grace gathered him into her arms, while William stared at the drawing with dawning horror. "She was murdered," William whispered. "Someone killed my wife." The next morning brought Marcus Webb to their door. He was a compact man in his 50s, wearing an unremarkable suit and the patient expression of someone accustomed to asking uncomfortable questions. He showed William his private investigator's license and Victoria Ashford's retainer letter. "I'm here to assess household stability for the custody hearing," Marcus explained in the foyer. "Standard procedure. I'll need to interview everyone, yourself, the children, and Miss Mitchell." "This is harassment," William said coldly. "Victoria has no grounds. Actually, she does. 17 failed nannies in 9 months creates a pattern of instability. The court will take that seriously." Marcus's tone was professional, but not unkind. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Thornton. The better you cooperate, the better it looks for you." Grace watched the exchange carefully. Something about Marcus Webb didn't quite fit. His eyes were too observant, his questions too precise. He went through the motions of assessing the household, but Grace had the distinct impression he was looking for something else entirely. When it was her turn to be interviewed, Marcus led her to William's study and closed the door. "Miss Mitchell, tell me about your qualifications." Grace listed her experience honestly. 8 years as a nanny, brief stint as a nursing assistant, no formal degrees in child development. She mentioned the house fire, her losses, her ongoing therapy. Marcus took notes without judgment. "And why did you take this position? The agency must have warned you about the family's reputation." "I read about Mrs. Thornton's death. I saw myself in those boys' grief. I thought maybe I could help them the way I wish someone had helped me." Marcus's pen stilled. "You understand that good intentions aren't enough. These children have trauma that requires professional intervention." "I'm not trying to replace a professional. I'm trying to be the person who shows up every day and doesn't leave." Grace leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Webb, can I ask you something? What's your real purpose here?" His eyebrows rose. "I told you. You're investigating something beyond custody fitness. The way you looked at Lucas's drawings, the questions you asked William about the night Catherine died. What do you know?" Marcus studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing something. Finally, he said, "Catherine Thornton hired me 3 weeks before she died. She'd discovered financial irregularities at Thornton Safety Systems, someone embezzling significant sums. She was gathering evidence to take to the FBI. Grace felt her stomach drop. She was murdered. "I believe so, but I can't prove it. The mechanic who examined her car took a sudden vacation to Mexico the day after the accident. The FBI agent she was supposed to meet claims no such meeting was scheduled. Every lead goes cold." Marcus closed his notebook. "When Victoria hired me for the custody case, I saw an opportunity. Get close to the family, see what I could learn. I've been playing both sides." "Does Victoria know about the embezzlement?" "No. She genuinely believes William's negligence killed her daughter. She's wrong, but her grief makes her certain." Marcus stood. "Miss Mitchell, those boys are in danger. If someone was willing to kill Catherine to keep her quiet, they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone else who gets too close to the truth. You should leave while you can." "I'm not leaving." "Then you're either very brave or very foolish." "Maybe both," Grace said quietly. That afternoon, everything accelerated. The first news van appeared at 2 p.m., followed by 3 more within the hour. Someone had leaked the story to the media. Billionaire's demon children drive away 17 nannies. Former nannies gave damning interviews, describing the boys as violent, disturbed, dangerous. Victoria appeared on camera, perfectly composed, expressing grave concern for her grandson's welfare. The boys watched the coverage with growing distress, seeing themselves portrayed as monsters. Ethan's face went pale and hard. Mason started pulling at his hair, a nervous tic Grace hadn't noticed before. Lucas simply shut down, retreating into himself. "Turn it off," William ordered, but the damage was done. The boys had seen how the world saw them. That evening, Grace found Mason in the bathroom, frantically scrubbing his hands until they were raw. When she tried to stop him, he broke down completely. "I have to be perfect," he sobbed. "If I'm perfect, maybe people won't leave. Maybe Mama would have stayed if I'd been better." Grace pulled him into her lap, this 7-year-old child who thought he could control death through good behavior. "Oh, sweetheart, your Mama didn't leave because of anything you did. She loved you exactly as you were. Perfect isn't real. It's just a way we hurt ourselves trying to prevent pain that's going to come anyway." "Then how do I make it stop hurting?" "You don't. You learn to carry it, and you let people help you carry it." Grace held him while he cried, rocking slightly, humming the same song she used to sing to Lily. The melody came automatically, muscle memory of motherhood that death hadn't erased. Mason eventually calmed, exhausted from crying. As Grace was tucking him into bed, he whispered, "Grace, will you still be here tomorrow?" "Yes." "Promise?" Grace thought of all the promises that had been broken, all the certainties that had shattered. "I promise I will try with everything I have to be here. That's the most honest promise I can make." "Okay," Mason said. and somehow that was enough. Downstairs, William was on the phone with his lawyer, voice tight with barely controlled rage. When he hung up, he looked at Grace with hollow eyes. Custody hearing is in 9 days. Victoria's lawyer has a psychiatrist prepared to testify that the boys show signs of severe emotional disturbance requiring immediate intervention. They're painting me as a negligent father drowning in work while his children fall apart. Are they wrong? Grace asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, brutal in its honesty. I don't know anymore, William admitted. I thought I was holding it together, keeping the company running, keeping the boys fed and clothed, keeping us all moving forward. But maybe I've just been keeping us all stuck. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went white. What is it? Grace asked. William turned the phone toward her. An anonymous text message, just 6 words. Stop asking questions or join Catherine. The threat changed everything. William immediately contacted the police, who took the message seriously enough to assign a patrol car to drive past the estate every few hours. Marcus Webb arrived within 30 minutes of being called, his professional mask slipping to reveal genuine alarm. This confirms it, Marcus said, studying the text message. Someone's watching you closely enough to know you're asking questions. William, I need you to think carefully. Who at the company knew Catherine was investigating the embezzlement? William paced his study, hands raking through his hair. Richard Morse, my CFO. He's been with me since the beginning, helped build the company from nothing. Catherine reported to him directly, which made her the perfect person to discover his theft, Marcus said grimly. Did she confront him? I don't know. She kept her investigation quiet, said she wanted solid proof before making accusations. William stopped pacing, face stricken. My God. I worked side by side with the man who killed her. I trusted him with my company, with my family's financial future. We don't have proof yet, Marcus cautioned. Suspicion isn't evidence, but I've been digging into Morse's finances. 3 weeks ago, he wired $200,000 to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, the same day Catherine's car went off the road. Grace, who'd been listening quietly from the doorway, spoke up. What about the mechanic who examined the car, the one who went to Mexico? Carlos Reyes disappeared with $50,000 in cash the day after ruling Catherine's death accidental. I've got contacts trying to locate him, but so far nothing. Marcus turned to William. I need access to your company's financial records. Everything Catherine would have seen. They're in her office. The locked one. William's jaw tightened. I haven't been able to bring myself to go through her things. Then it's time, Marcus said gently. Because whoever sent that text knows you're getting close to something, and they're getting desperate. Upstairs, the boys were supposed to be sleeping. Instead, all 3 were pressed against Ethan's bedroom door, listening to the adults' muffled conversation. When Grace came to check on them, she found them huddled together, faces pale with fear. Someone wants to hurt Daddy, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Grace considered lying, then remembered her promise to be honest. Someone might, but we're being very careful, and the police are watching the house. Like they watched Mama? Lucas's voice was small, accusing. They didn't save her. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Grace sat down on the floor with them, pulling all 3 boys close. You're right. Adults can't always keep you safe, no matter how much we want to. Bad things happen sometimes, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we try harder, and we stick together. What if something happens to you? Mason whispered. What if you go away like Mama? Then you'll hurt, and it will be awful, and you'll survive it, because you're stronger than you know. Grace looked at each boy in turn. But I'm not planning to go anywhere, and neither is your dad. We're fighting for this family. Can we fight too? Ethan asked. We're not babies. Grace thought about this carefully. Children deserved agency, especially children who'd already learned that adults couldn't shield them from every harm. Yes, she said finally. You can fight by telling the truth about what you remember. You can fight by sticking together and looking out for each other. And you can fight by being brave enough to let people help you. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She found herself wandering the mansion's hallways, trailing her fingers along walls that held secrets in every shadow. Catherine's locked office drew her like gravity. She stood outside the door, wondering what evidence might lie beyond it, what truth had died with its keeper. "Can't sleep either?" William's voice startled her. He emerged from the darkness holding a key. "I suppose it's time." The office was a time capsule. Catherine's coffee cup still sat on the desk, dried residue at the bottom. Her computer monitor was dark, keyboard pristine. Files were stacked with precise organization, each labeled in elegant handwriting. The room smelled faintly of perfume and old coffee and grief. William moved through the space like a man underwater, touching things carefully as if they might dissolve. "She spent so much time in here. Sometimes I'd find her working at 3 in the morning, said she couldn't sleep with numbers swimming in her head." His voice cracked. "I should have paid more attention. Should have asked what was bothering her." Grace noticed the photograph array on the bookshelf. Victoria as a younger woman, another blonde girl who must be the sister Emily, Catherine and William on their wedding day, the boys as babies. But one photo made her pause. A young man in a suit, standing beside Catherine at what looked like a company event. Something about his smile seemed off, predatory. "Who's this?" Grace asked. William glanced over. "Richard Morse. That was taken about 5 years ago, right after we went public. Richard was so proud. He'd invested everything in the company." His expression darkened. "And apparently he helped himself to more than his share." They spent 2 hours going through Catherine's files. Most were standard financial reports, but in the bottom drawer of her desk, hidden beneath old tax returns, they found a leather journal. Catherine's handwriting filled the pages, dates, account numbers, transactions that didn't add up. She'd been methodical in documenting the embezzlement trail. The final entry, dated 3 days before her death, read, "Confirmed, 40 memos over 5 years. Richard knows I know. He called me into his office today, asked about my research. His eyes were cold. I've never been afraid of him before. Meeting FBI agent Sandra Morrison on the 15th. Until then, I'm saying nothing. God, I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's an explanation, but the numbers don't lie." William read the passage 3 times, hands shaking. She was scared. She knew she was in danger, and she didn't tell me. Why didn't she tell me? "Maybe she was trying to protect you," Grace said quietly. "If Morse suspected you knew, you'd be in danger too." So she faced it alone, drove into a storm alone, died alone, while I sat at home drinking scotch and feeling sorry for myself because she was working late again. William's face contorted with rage and guilt. "I failed her. I failed her, and now she's dead, and I can't. He collapsed into Catherine's desk chair, shoulders heaving with sobs he'd held back for 9 months. Grace knelt beside him, one hand on his arm, bearing witness to grief too large for words. They stayed that way for a long time, surrounded by a dead woman's evidence and a living man's regrets. The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Grace and William ran downstairs to find the boys huddled in the living room, staring at the window where a brick had crashed through. Attached to it was a note in block letters, "Last warning." The police arrived within minutes this time. Officers searched the property while Grace kept the boys calm, and William gave his statement. Marcus Webb showed up 30 minutes later, looking grim. "The custody hearing is in 8 days, Marcus said quietly to William. "Whoever's doing this knows Victoria's lawsuit gives them cover. If something happens to you, if you look unstable or dangerous, she gets the boys and the investigation dies." "Then we move faster," William said. "We take Catherine's journal to the FBI tomorrow. And if Morse gets wind of it before they can arrest him, if he runs or destroys evidence?" Marcus shook his head. "We need ironclad proof. The journal is circumstantial. We need the mechanic, Carlos Reyes. He's the one who can confirm the brake line was cut." "Then find him," William said flatly. "I'm trying. But these things take time, and time is exactly what we don't have." Marcus glanced at the boys. William, you need to consider sending them somewhere safe. If this escalates— No, William's voice was steel. I'm not losing my sons. That's what Morse wants, what Victoria wants. Everyone wants to take them from me because I'm supposedly incapable, but I'm their father. This is our home. We're not running. Grace admired his resolve, even as she questioned his judgment. And the boys were terrified. The threats were escalating, and stubbornness wasn't the same as strength. But she also understood. Sometimes you had to stand your ground, even when the ground was crumbling beneath you. The next morning brought a different kind of crisis. Victoria arrived at 9 a.m. with her lawyer, a skeletal woman named Patricia Hammond, who smiled like a shark. They served William with an emergency motion to place the boys in Victoria's custody immediately, pending the hearing. Given last night's violent incident, Patricia said smoothly, we believe the children are in immediate danger in this household. Judge Morrison has agreed to an expedited review tomorrow at 2 p.m. William's face went white. You can't do this. You have no right. I have every right to protect my grandsons, Victoria said coldly. Someone threw a brick through your window, William. Someone is threatening your family. How is this environment safe for children? Grace watched Victoria's face carefully. The older woman believed what she was saying. Her concern was genuine, if misguided. But there was something else too, something that looked almost like fear. Mrs. Ashford, Grace said quietly, can we speak privately? Victoria's eyes narrowed. I have nothing to say to the hired help. Then listen. Grace stepped closer, voice low enough the lawyers couldn't hear. Your daughter was murdered. Not by William. By someone at his company. Someone who's now threatening this family to keep the truth buried. If you take those boys away from their father right now, you're giving the killer exactly what he wants. Victoria's composure cracked just for a second. What are you talking about? Ask Marcus Webb. He has evidence. Or better yet, look at your daughter's journal, the one she kept hidden in her office. Read what she wrote about being afraid. Grace held Victoria's gaze. You've spent 9 months blaming the wrong person, and in the meantime, the man who actually killed Catherine is walking free. That's insane. The police ruled it an accident. The mechanic who examined her car was paid $50,000 to lie. He's disappeared. The FBI agent Catherine was supposed to meet claims no such meeting existed. Someone powerful covered this up. Grace's voice hardened. You want to protect those boys? Then stop attacking their father and start asking who really killed your daughter. Victoria stared at her, shock and doubt warring in her expression. Patricia Hammond interrupted, voice sharp. Mrs. Ashford, we need to go. The motion has been filed. After they left, William slumped against the wall. Tomorrow. I have until tomorrow to prove I'm fit, or I lose them. We'll prove it, Grace said with more confidence than she felt. Marcus, what do you need? Marcus was already on his phone, pacing. I need a miracle. I need Carlos Reyes to materialize and confess. I need Richard Morse to make a mistake. I need— He stopped. Wait. Catherine met with someone 3 days before she died. Someone she trusted enough to give them a copy of her evidence. It's in her calendar. Lunch with S. Giovanni's noon. If we can figure out who S is— Sandra, William said suddenly. The FBI agent, Sandra Morrison. She met with Catherine before the official meeting. Maybe she has Catherine's evidence. Marcus's eyes lit up. Get me her number. Now. Within an hour, they had Sandra Morrison on speakerphone. Yes, she'd met with Catherine. Yes, Catherine had given her copies of financial documents. Yes, an investigation had been opened into Thornton's safety systems. But we moved too slowly, Agent Morrison said, frustration evident in her voice. By the time we had warrants, the accounts had been cleaned out. Morse is smart. He covered his tracks. Without the mechanic's testimony or physical evidence of tampering, we can't prove murder, just embezzlement, and even that case is shaky. What about the journal? William asked desperately. Inadmissible without corroborating evidence. It's hearsay, her opinions and suspicions. A defense attorney would shred it. Agent Morrison paused. I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton. We're still investigating, but these cases take months, sometimes years. I understand you're facing a custody hearing that I can't help with. After the call ended, defeat settled over the room like fog. Tomorrow, William would stand before a judge and try to prove he could keep his children safe, while someone out there wanted him to fail. Grace looked at the three boys playing quietly in the corner, trying to be invisible, trying not to be more trouble than they'd already been. She thought of Lily, of the night the smoke alarms went off, of 47 seconds fumbling with a lock. She thought of how much could be lost in the space between wanting to protect someone and actually succeeding. There has to be something we're missing, she said. Catherine was too smart to have only one backup plan. William looked up. What do you mean? She gave documents to the FBI. She kept a journal, but she knew Morse was dangerous. She knew he might come after her. Grace thought out loud. If I were her, I'd have one more insurance policy. Something Morse didn't know about. Something that would surface if anything happened to me. They all looked at each other, the same realization dawning. We need to search this house top to bottom, Marcus said. Every hiding place, every secret she might have kept. They had 18 hours until the custody hearing. 18 hours to find evidence that might not exist. 18 hours to save a family that had already been broken once. Grace looked at Lucas, at his careful, observant eyes. He'd seen something the night his mother died. He'd been documenting it in his drawings. Maybe he knew more than any of them realized. Lucas, Grace said gently, kneeling beside the boy. The pictures you draw of that night, is there anything else you remember? Anything at all that might help us? Lucas considered this seriously. Then he opened his ever-present drawing pad to a page they hadn't seen. This one showed Catherine's car, but not the crash. She was sitting in the driver's seat, and she was holding something small, speaking into it. What's this? Grace asked, pointing to the object. Mama's phone, Lucas said. She was talking to it, recording something. William went very still. Her phone was never recovered from the accident. The police assumed it was lost in the snow or the impact. But what if it wasn't? Marcus leaned forward intently. What if someone took it? Or what if... Lucas, do you remember where the car went off the road? Mile marker 47, Lucas recited. Mama said it into the phone. I'm at mile marker 47. Something's wrong with the brakes. There's a truck behind me. Oh, God. His voice broke. Grace pulled the child close while Marcus and William exchanged electric looks. If she was recording, William said slowly, if the phone had auto-upload to the cloud, we can access her backup, Marcus finished. William, do you have her cloud passwords? They ran upstairs to William's computer. 20 minutes of frantic searching later, they'd accessed Catherine's cloud storage, and there, uploaded automatically at 8:53 p.m. on March 15th, was a 7-minute audio recording. William's hand hovered over the play button. I'm not sure I can listen to this. You have to, Grace said gently. For the boys, for Catherine, for the truth. He pressed play, and Catherine's voice filled the room. Strong at first, then increasingly frightened, as she described following Richard Morse's car, seeing him meet with the mechanic, hearing them discuss brake lines and making it look like an accident. She'd recorded everything, her testimony and her terror, right up until the moment the brakes failed and her car careened toward the embankment. The recording ended with screaming and the crunch of metal and then silence. William was crying. Grace was crying. Even Marcus had to wipe his eyes. But they had it, irrefutable proof. Catherine's last gift to them, the truth. I'll take this to Agent Morrison immediately, Marcus said. This changes everything. With this recording, they can arrest Morse tonight. Will it be enough for the custody hearing? William asked hoarsely. It proves you weren't negligent. It proves Catherine was murdered investigating corporate crime. No judge will rule against you now. Marcus was already moving toward the door. "I'll call you when it's done. Keep the boys safe. We're almost through this." After he left, Grace found William standing at the window staring out at the snow-covered mountains. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. "She saved us," he said quietly. "Even dying, she was still protecting us." Grace stood beside him. "She loved you. All of you. That kind of love doesn't stop. I don't know how to do this without her." "You don't have to do it without her. She's still here, in those boys, in her words, in the choices she made." Grace paused. "But you also don't have to do it alone. That's what she'd want. For you to let people help." William turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time since she'd arrived. "You're not planning to be nanny number 18 who quits, are you?" "No," Grace said firmly. "I'm planning to be the one who stays." The arrest of Richard Morse happened at 11:47 p.m. that night. Marcus called with the news. FBI agents had taken him into custody at his home, charging him with embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, and Catherine's death. The mechanic, Carlos Reyes, had been located in Cabo San Lucas and was being extradited. The case, Marcus said, was solid. Justice was finally coming. William took the call in his study, then sat in silence for 20 minutes, unable to process that the man he'd trusted for a decade had killed his wife. When he finally emerged, he found Grace in the kitchen making chamomile tea, a habit she'd developed for the boys' bedtime routine. "It's over," he said, though his voice held no relief. "Morse is in jail. The FBI has everything they need. Catherine's name will be cleared." "But she's still gone." Grace set down the kettle. "Justice doesn't bring her back." "No, it doesn't." William sank into a chair at the kitchen table. "I keep thinking about all the times I joked with Morse, complained about budget meetings, trusted him with our future. He smiled at my son's birthday parties. He gave a eulogy at Catherine's funeral, and the whole time he'd murdered her." Grace sat across from him. "Evil hides in plain sight. It has to, or we'd see it coming. The boys will know now. They'll know their mother was killed by someone I brought into our lives." William's voice cracked. "How do I tell them that?" "You tell them the truth. That their mother was brave, that she stood up against someone powerful and corrupt because it was right, that she died fighting for justice." Grace reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "And you tell them that loving people means taking risks, that their mother knew the risks and loved them enough to take them anyway." William turned his hand over, grasping hers. "You have a gift for this. For finding the right words when everything's falling apart." "I've had practice." Grace's smile was sad. 3 years of finding ways to explain the unexplainable. You get good at it, whether you want to or not." They sat in the quiet kitchen, hands linked across the table. Two people who'd learned that survival sometimes meant holding on to strangers who understood your particular brand of broken. The custody hearing the next day had a surreal quality. Victoria arrived looking diminished, her lawyer conspicuously absent. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Holloway, had clearly been briefed on the overnight developments. She called Victoria and William to approach the bench before proceedings formally began. "Mrs. Ashford," Judge Holloway said, her tone neither harsh nor gentle, "I understand you've filed to withdraw your custody petition." Victoria nodded stiffly. "Given recent revelations about my daughter's death, I recognize I've been directing my grief inappropriately. William is a good father. The boys should remain with him." The judge turned to William. "Mr. Thornton, I've reviewed the FBI's evidence regarding your wife's murder. I'm deeply sorry for your loss and for the investigation you've endured while grieving. However, I still have concerns about the household stability. 17 nannies in 9 months suggests ongoing issues beyond the custody dispute." William straightened. "Your Honor, those issues stemmed from my son's unprocessed trauma and my own inability to help them through it. We've since engaged proper therapists, and Miss Mitchell has provided the consistency the boys needed." "Miss Mitchell." Judge Holloway's gaze found Grace in the gallery. "Please approach." Grace walked forward, heart hammering. She hadn't expected to be called. "You've been employed by Mr. Thornton for how long?" the judge asked. 10 days, Your Honor. And in those 10 days, you've witnessed death threats, media harassment, and a criminal investigation into murder. Most people would run. Why haven't you? Grace chose her words carefully. Because those boys have already lost their mother. They don't need to lose another person who's supposed to care for them. Stability isn't the absence of crisis, Your Honor. It's the presence of people who don't leave when crisis comes. Judge Holloway studied her for a long moment. "I've reviewed your background, Miss Mitchell. I'm aware of your own losses. Some might question whether someone with significant trauma is the right caretaker for traumatized children. With respect, Your Honor, I believe that's exactly why I'm the right person. I know what they're feeling, because I've felt it. I know what they need, because I needed it too." Grace met the judge's eyes steadily. Nobody gets through grief without help. These boys deserve help from someone who understands the weight of what they're carrying. Something shifted in the judge's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. She turned back to William. "Mr. Thornton, I'm denying Mrs. Ashford's petition. The boys will remain in your custody. However, I'm ordering ongoing family therapy, regular check-ins with child services, and I expect Miss Mitchell to maintain her position for at least 6 months to ensure stability. Can you commit to these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor," William said, relief flooding his face. "Mrs. Ashford, I encourage you to rebuild your relationship with your grandsons through appropriate channels. Family therapy together might be beneficial." Judge Holloway's gavel came down. "We're adjourned." Outside the courtroom, Victoria approached them hesitantly. She'd aged years in the past 24 hours, grief and guilt etched into every line of her face. "William, She stopped, struggling with words. "I've been monstrous to you, to Grace. I blamed you for Catherine's death because blaming you was easier than admitting I'd failed her as a mother." "You didn't fail her," William said quietly. "Catherine loved you. She kept photos of you in her office, talked about you constantly. She wanted to make you proud." "I know. Marcus showed me her journal." Victoria's voice broke. "She wrote about being afraid to disappoint me, about needing my approval, and I was too busy judging her to see that she was asking for help." Grace watched this exchange, seeing herself in Victoria's self-recrimination, the endless loop of if only that grief creates, the ways we torture ourselves with hindsight. "Mrs. Ashford," Grace said gently, "Catherine died because a criminal killed her, not because you weren't the perfect mother, not because William wasn't the perfect husband. Evil chose her. You didn't." Victoria looked at Grace with something like wonder. "How do you not hate me?" "I tried to take those boys from their father. I called you hired help. I've been cruel and vindictive and you were a mother in pain, doing what you thought was right." Grace's tone was firm but kind. "I've learned that grief makes us into people we don't recognize. The question isn't whether you made mistakes. It's whether you're willing to do better now." "I want to," Victoria whispered. "I want to know my grandsons, really know them, not just control them, but I don't know how. I've spent 20 years being angry and afraid, and now I don't know how to be anything else." William surprised everyone by stepping forward and embracing his mother-in-law. Victoria stiffened initially, then collapsed into sobs against his shoulder. "We'll figure it out together," William said. "For Catherine, for the boys, for all of us." That evening, with the custody battle finally resolved and Morse behind bars, the Thornton household felt lighter than it had in months. The boys were told an age-appropriate version of events, that their mother had been very brave, that the man who hurt her was now in jail, that justice had been served. Lucas cried quietly, Ethan asked sharp questions, and Mason worried that talking about it meant they'd forget the happy memories. Grace and William reassured them that remembering the truth didn't diminish the love. Victoria had been invited for dinner, a gesture that clearly moved her to tears. She arrived with gifts, not expensive toys meant to buy affection, but thoughtful items. For Ethan, a photo album of Catherine as a child. For Mason, his mother's favorite recipe book. For Lucas, a set of art supplies and a leather journal. "Your mother kept journals," Victoria explained to Lucas. "She said drawing and writing helped her think. I thought maybe you'd like to do the same." Lucas accepted the journal reverently, running his fingers over the leather. "Thank you, Grandma." The word grandma made Victoria's breath catch. She knelt down, eye level with her grandsons. "I'm so sorry for scaring you, for making you think I wanted to take you away from your daddy. I was wrong. Can you forgive me?" The boys looked at each other, communicating in that silent way siblings do. Finally, Ethan spoke for all of them. "Mama said, forgiveness means deciding that the future is more important than the past. So yeah, we forgive you." Victoria pulled all three boys into a hug, crying openly now. Grace watched from the kitchen doorway, William beside her. They'd become a team in these 10 days, united by crisis and commitment. "Thank you," William said quietly, "for everything. For staying when you could have run. For seeing them as children instead of problems. For helping me see that too." "You would have gotten there eventually," Grace said. "Maybe, but maybe not in time." William turned to face her fully. "Grace, I know this started as a job, but somewhere along the way it became something else. You're not just their nanny, you're family, and I—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider whatever he'd been about to say. "I hope you'll stay, not just for 6 months, for as long as you want." Grace felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight bands of grief she'd worn for 3 years. "I'm not going anywhere." Later that night, after Victoria had gone home with promises to return Sunday for dinner, after the boys had finally fallen asleep in their own beds for the first time in weeks, Grace stood in the hallway looking at Lucas's drawings. He'd pinned them up himself. The accident scene, yes, but also new ones. The family around a dinner table, a woman with Grace's face reading stories, a house that looked happy instead of haunted. She felt William's presence before she heard him. "He's drawing the future now," William observed. "Not just the past. Children are resilient, more than we give them credit for." Grace touched one of the drawings gently. "They'll be okay, eventually. Will we?" Grace turned to find William looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not romance exactly, too early, too complicated, too much grief between them, but something, connection, possibility, the slow recognition that healing didn't mean forgetting, and that letting someone new in wasn't betraying who you'd lost. "I think so," Grace said honestly. "It won't be easy. There'll be setbacks and hard days and moments when the grief feels fresh all over again. But yes, I think we'll be okay." William nodded slowly. "Catherine would have liked you. She always believed in second chances. In people who kept showing up even when it was hard. Then I'm glad I got to honor her by helping her boys." Grace paused, then added softly, "and by helping her husband remember he doesn't have to carry everything alone." They stood in the quiet hallway, two damaged people learning to trust again, surrounded by a child's hopeful drawings of a future that might actually be possible. Downstairs, William's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. "Morse confessed, gave up his co-conspirators. Catherine's name is cleared completely. She's a hero. Thought you should know." William showed Grace the message. She read it and smiled, sad but genuine. "A hero," she repeated. "The boys will like knowing that." "She always was one," William said. "I just wish I'd told her that more often." "Then tell them, every day. Tell her sons how brave their mother was. Make sure they know that love means standing up for what's right, even when it's dangerous." Grace met his eyes. "That's how you honor her now, by teaching them to be brave like she was." William nodded, something settling in his expression, resolution maybe, or acceptance. the slow, painful work of moving forward while carrying the past. Above them, in his bed, Lucas dreamed of his mother for the first time without fear. In the dream, she was smiling. She was telling him it was okay to be happy again, that love didn't end with death, it just changed shape. And when he woke in the morning, he would draw that dream. He would pin it on his wall beside all the others. Another piece of the future he was learning to imagine. 3 weeks passed in something resembling peace. Richard Morse remained in federal custody awaiting trial, his confession detailed and damning. The media, which had vilified the Thornton boys as demons, now celebrated them as brave survivors. The narrative had flipped so completely that William stopped reading the articles. Redemption felt as invasive as condemnation. But beneath the surface calm, fault lines were spreading. It started small. Mason's hair-pulling intensified despite therapy. Grace would find clumps hidden under his pillow, in his backpack, tucked into books. When she confronted him gently, he insisted he was fine, that he just needed to be more perfect. Ethan's selective mutism at school worsened. His teacher called daily with concerns. The boy hadn't spoken in class in over a month now. At home, he talked constantly, bossing his brothers, directing their play. But beyond the mansion walls, his voice disappeared completely. Lucas's nightmares escalated. He'd wake screaming about cars and ice and his mother's voice cutting off mid-sentence. Some nights he wet the bed, mortified and apologetic. Grace would change his sheets without judgment, humming the same lullaby she'd once sung to Lily, trying to soothe wounds that went deeper than any song could reach. And Grace herself was unraveling. She'd been so focused on saving the boys that she'd ignored her own fractures, spreading. The anniversary of Lily's death approached. December 24th, Christmas Eve. 3 years since the fire. 3 years since Grace had fumbled with a lock for 47 seconds while her daughter burned. The panic attacks started in week 4. Grace would be fine, perfectly functional, and then suddenly she couldn't breathe. The kitchen would smell like smoke when there was no smoke. She'd hear Lily calling Mommy when the house was silent. She'd check locks obsessively, terror rising that somehow she'd trapped someone again. William noticed, but didn't know how to help. His own grief was a constant weight, some days manageable, other days crushing. He'd thrown himself back into work, trying to rebuild the company Morse had corrupted. 16-hour days became his new normal. The boys saw him at breakfast if they were lucky, at dinner if he made it home early. They were all drowning in separate rooms again. Victoria, to her credit, tried to help. She came for dinner every Sunday as promised, slowly rebuilding trust with her grandsons. But she carried her own damage, 20 years of unprocessed grief over Emily's death, compounded now by Catherine's murder. Sometimes Grace would find Victoria standing frozen in the hallway, staring at photographs, tears running silently down her face. The breaking point came on December 22nd. Grace was in the boys' bathroom helping Lucas brush his teeth when she noticed the small bottle tucked behind the toilet. Hair growth supplement, clearly Mason's, hidden from the world that might judge his pulling, but it was the razor blade wrapped in tissue beside it that made Grace's blood run cold. She confronted Mason after the boys were in bed, William working late again. The 7-year-old tried to lie, said the blade was for a school project, but when Grace pressed gently, he collapsed. "I just wanted to see if I could feel something else," Mason sobbed. "Something that wasn't sad. I wanted to control the hurting instead of it controlling me." Grace held him while her own heart shattered. This child, this baby who should be worrying about homework and video games, was self-harming because his grief had nowhere else to go. She called William immediately. He came home within 20 minutes, face white with fear. They sat up with Mason until dawn, talking about pain and control and the dangerous lies our minds tell us when we're hurting. They called the therapist emergency line. They made Mason promise to tell them when the thoughts got bad, but Grace knew promises weren't enough. They were all barely holding on, and pretending otherwise was killing them. The next morning, Grace made a decision that terrified her. She found William in his study, looking like he hadn't slept. "I need to leave," she said without preamble. "Not forever, just for a few days. Through Christmas. I can't—" Her voice cracked. "I can't be what they need right now because I'm falling apart myself." William stood abruptly. "Grace, no, please. We need you. The boys need you. You need someone whole, William. Someone who isn't checking locks 40 times a day and having panic attacks in the pantry. Someone who can actually help Mason instead of just recognizing herself in his pain." Grace forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm not abandoning you. I'm asking for 3 days to fall apart somewhere they can't see me. Then I'll come back." "I promise." "What if you don't come back? What if this is just like all the others?" "I'm not like the others." Grace's voice rose with frustration and pain. "I love those boys. I love—" She stopped, realizing what she'd almost said. "I'm staying, but I need space to break without breaking them more." William stared at her, and in his eyes she saw her own terror reflected back. The fear that people leave, that everyone leaves, that love isn't enough to keep people from disappearing. 3 days, he said finally. "But Grace, if you don't come back, if you decide this is too much, I'll come back." "You can't promise that. You don't know what will happen when you let yourself actually feel everything you've been holding back." He was right, and they both knew it. Grace packed a small bag and left before the boys woke. She couldn't face saying goodbye, couldn't bear the accusation in their eyes, even though she was coming back. She drove 2 hours to a motel in Boulder, checked in under a false name, and for the first time in 3 years, let herself completely fall apart. She screamed into pillows. She threw things. She called the grief counselor she'd stopped seeing a year ago and sobbed through a 2-hour emergency session. She looked at photos of Lily on her phone until her eyes swelled shut from crying. She felt every second of those 47 seconds, played them on loop, tortured herself with "if only" and "what if" and "why didn't I?" Back at the mansion, the boys woke to find Grace gone. Ethan's face went blank. Mason started pulling his hair immediately. Lucas didn't cry. He just went silent and still, shutting down completely. William tried to explain. Grace needed a few days for herself. "She'll be back," she promised. "Everyone promises," Ethan said flatly. "Promises don't mean anything." William called Victoria, desperate. She arrived within the hour and did her best, but the boys could sense the panic beneath the adults' calm facade. Grace was gone, just like their mother, just like every other nanny. People left. That was the lesson they kept learning. That evening, Victoria found William drinking in Catherine's office. Not heavily, just 1 glass of scotch, but enough to dull the edges of his failure. "Stop it," Victoria said sharply. "You're not doing this." "Doing what? Trying to cope? Trying to survive another loss?" William's laugh was bitter. "Everyone leaves, Victoria. Catherine died. 17 nannies quit. Now Grace didn't leave. She asked for space. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm sitting it feels exactly the same." William set down his glass. "I'm losing them. The boys are getting worse, not better. Mason's self-harming. Ethan won't speak. Lucas barely functions. And I don't know how to help them because I can barely help myself." Victoria sat down across from him, and for the first time since Catherine's death, she looked at William with something like compassion. "Do you know why I blamed you?" she asked quietly. "Really? Because I called Catherine out in a storm?" "No, because blaming you meant I didn't have to blame myself." Victoria's voice shook. "I killed Emily. I was driving the car. I was distracted. And when Catherine died the same way, I thought it was God punishing me by taking my second daughter, and I couldn't live with that, so I made it your fault instead." William stared at her. "You never told me that about Emily." "Because I couldn't admit it, not to you, not to anyone. I've spent 20 years running from that guilt, and it's poisoned everything." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. But Grace was right. Evil chose Catherine. A criminal killed her, just like an accident killed Emily. "We didn't cause these deaths, William. We just survived them. And surviving feels like a crime when everyone you love is dead." "I don't know how to survive this," William whispered. "I'm failing them. My sons are falling apart, and I can't catch them because I'm falling too." "Then we fall together," Victoria said, "and we get back up together. That's what family does." That night, Victoria stayed at the mansion. She and William made dinner together, badly, burning the chicken and oversalting everything. But they made it. The boys picked at their food, subdued and grieving Grace's absence. "Is she coming back?" Lucas asked in his small voice. "She promised she would," William said. "But what if she doesn't?" Mason's voice rose with panic. "What if something happens to her like Mama? What if we never see her again?" William knelt beside his son's chairs, gathering all three boys close. "I can't promise that bad things won't happen. I can't promise that everyone will always stay, but I promise that we'll face whatever comes together. And I promise that even when people leave or die or need space to heal, the love doesn't leave. It stays. It changes shape, but it stays." It wasn't enough to fix anything, but it was honest, and honesty was all he had left to give. 200 miles away, Grace stared at her phone. She'd turned it off after the grief counselor session, needing complete isolation. Now, alone in a cheap motel room, she turned it back on. 47 messages, calls from William, Victoria, Marcus Webb, the boy's therapist. One voicemail from Lucas, just breathing, and then in a whisper, "Grace, I drew you coming home, so you have to. That's how magic works." Grace played it 17 times, crying harder with each repetition. Her counselor's words echoed, "You can't pour from an empty cup, Grace, but you also can't heal in isolation." Real healing happens in community, with people who see your brokenness and love you anyway. Grace looked at her suitcase, still packed. She could leave right now, drive through the night, be back at the mansion by morning. Or she could stay hidden, keep running from the terrifying vulnerability of letting people need her when she was this broken. The choice felt impossibly heavy. She picked up her phone and called William. He answered on the first ring. "Grace." "I'm not okay," she said without preamble. "I'm really, really not okay, and I don't know if I can be what those boys need." "You don't have to be okay. You just have to be here." William's voice cracked. "They don't need perfect. They need present. They need you, even when you're broken, especially when you're broken, because then they know it's okay to be broken too. What if I make it worse? What if you make it better? What if showing them that adults can fall apart and come back together is exactly the lesson they need?" Grace looked at her reflection in the motel mirror. Swollen eyes, tangled hair, face blotchy from crying. This was what grief looked like, ugly and real and human. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said. "Christmas Eve. But William, I need you to know, I can't save them. I can't even save myself most days. All I can do is show up and try." "That's all any of us can do," William said quietly. "Come home, Grace. Please come home." Grace hung up and lay on the motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow was the anniversary of Lily's death. Tomorrow she'd have to face the boys and admit she'd almost run. Tomorrow she'd have to be brave enough to be broken in front of people she loved. But tonight she'd let herself be human. She'd grieve her daughter. She'd acknowledge that healing wasn't linear, that some days you moved forward and some days you fell back. She'd accept that she was damaged and capable, broken and strong, falling apart and holding on, all of it, all at once. The terrible complexity of survival. Grace returned to the Thornton estate at dawn on Christmas Eve. The sun was just breaking over the mountains, painting the snow gold and pink, impossibly beautiful for such a hard day. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, gathering courage, before finally walking to the front door. William opened it before she could knock. He looked like he hadn't slept, shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed. But when he saw her, relief flooded his face so completely that Grace felt her resolve nearly break. "You came back," he said simply. "I promised I would." They stood in the doorway, the morning cold swirling around them. Two people learning that sometimes love means showing up even when you're terrified of disappointing everyone. "The boys are still asleep," William said quietly. "But Grace, before you see them, I need to tell you something. Marcus called last night. The FBI finished their investigation. They found evidence that Morse had been planning to target you next. He thought you knew too much, that Catherine might have told you something before she died. There were emails, plans." His voice broke. "You were in danger the whole time, and I brought you into this house, into this mess." "Stop." Grace put a hand on his arm. "Evil makes its own choices. You didn't put me in danger. Morse did. And I'm here. I'm safe. That's what matters. But what if? William, we can't live in the what-ifs. Believe me, I've tried. It's a prison." Grace took a breath. "I spent 3 years asking, what if I'd checked the lock sooner? What if I'd never installed it? What if I'd stayed home that night? It doesn't bring Lily back. It just keeps me from living forward." William searched her face. "How do you do it? How do you keep going when everything inside you says to run?" "Honestly, some days I don't. Some days I hide in motel rooms and fall apart." Grace's smile was sad but real. "But then I remember that running from pain just means carrying it with you everywhere. At least here, I can set it down sometimes. At least here, I'm not alone with it." A sound from upstairs made them both look up. Small footsteps. Then Lucas appeared at the top of the staircase. He stared at Grace for a long moment, as if confirming she was real. "You came back," he whispered. "I promised." Lucas ran down the stairs and crashed into Grace with enough force to nearly knock her over. She caught him, holding tight as he sobbed into her shoulder. Within seconds, Ethan and Mason appeared too, and then all 3 boys were wrapped around her, crying and clinging and making her promise again and again that she wouldn't leave. "I'm here," Grace said over and over. "I'm here and I'm staying. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm here." Victoria emerged from the kitchen, relief and something like respect in her eyes. She'd stayed the whole 3 days, Grace realized. Stepped in when Grace couldn't. Been the grandmother these boys needed. "Thank you," Grace mouthed to Victoria. Victoria nodded, then quietly said, "I know what it's like to need to run. I've been running for 20 years. Thank you for coming back." That morning, they made breakfast together, all of them, chaotic and loud in the kitchen. The boys told Grace about everything she'd missed, talking over each other, desperate to fill her in on 3 days of their lives. Mason showed her a new drawing. Ethan actually spoke to her about school. Lucas wouldn't let go of her hand. After breakfast, Grace found Lucas alone in his room, staring at his collection of drawings pinned to the wall. She sat beside him on the bed. "Lucas, I need to tell you something. Today is a hard day for me. 3 years ago today, my daughter Lily died. So I might be sad today, and I wanted you to know it's not because of you, it's just grief coming back around." Lucas considered this seriously. "Does it always come back?" "Yes, but it gets a little easier each time. The first year I couldn't breathe. The second year I could breathe, but it hurt. This year," Grace paused, surprised by her own truth. "This year, I can remember her and smile. Not just cry, both. That's progress." "Will we be able to smile about Mama someday?" "Yes, sweetheart, you will. It takes time, but yes." Lucas pulled out his new leather journal, the one Victoria had given him. He'd filled several pages already with drawings, not just of the accident anymore, but of the family, of Grace reading stories, of Victoria cooking, of his father smiling. "I'm drawing the future," Lucas said. "Like you said, drawing what I want to happen." "That's beautiful. Can I see?" Lucas flipped to a page near the back. It showed a Christmas tree, a family gathered around it, everyone smiling. In the drawing, there was William, The three boys, Victoria and Grace. They were holding hands in a circle. "This is for tonight," Lucas said. "Christmas Eve. I drew it so it would be true." Grace felt tears prick her eyes. "I love it. Can we try to make it real?" "That's the plan." That afternoon, William had to make an appearance at the company for an emergency board meeting about restructuring after Morse's arrest. He hated leaving, especially on Christmas Eve, but Grace insisted she and Victoria could handle the boys. "We're a team now," Grace said. "Go, we'll be fine." After he left, Grace and Victoria took the boys to cut down a Christmas tree. It was a Thornton family tradition that had been abandoned this year until Victoria suggested reviving it. They drove to a tree farm 20 minutes away, bundled in coats and scarves, and spent an hour debating which tree was perfect. Ethan wanted the tallest one. Mason wanted the most symmetrical. Lucas wanted the one with a bird's nest in it because the bird's family lived there and we should keep it. They compromised on a slightly lopsided 8-footer that the boys could all agree on. Getting it into Victoria's SUV was comedy. Branches everywhere, pine needles in hair, everyone laughing. It was the first time Grace had heard all three boys laugh at the same time, unguarded and genuine. Back at the mansion, they spent hours decorating. Victoria produced boxes of ornaments from her car. Catherine's childhood ornaments, ones she'd saved for years. Each one had a story. The boys hung them carefully, reverently, listening to their grandmother talk about their mother as a little girl. She was stubborn, Victoria said, smiling through tears. Insisted on putting the star on top herself every year, even though she was too short. Your grandfather would have to hold her up, and she'd take forever getting it exactly right. She was a perfectionist, even at 5 years old. Mason perked up. Mama was a perfectionist? The worst kind. She'd redo things 10 times if they weren't exactly as she imagined. Victoria touched Mason's hair gently. But she learned eventually that perfect isn't real, that good enough is actually perfect because it's real and it's done with love. Mason absorbed this, something shifting in his expression. His mother had been like him. His mother had struggled and learned and grown. Maybe he could too. As evening fell, they made hot chocolate and sat around the lit tree. The boys asked more questions about Catherine, and Victoria answered them all. The funny stories, the sad ones, the complicated truths about a woman who was human and flawed and deeply loved. "Did Mama know she was going to die?" Lucas asked suddenly. The room went quiet. Victoria and Grace exchanged glances. "I don't think so," Victoria said carefully, "but I think she knew she might be in danger. And she went anyway, because standing up for what's right was more important to her than being safe." "That's stupid," Ethan said harshly. "She should have stayed alive. We needed her." "You're right," Victoria said, surprising him. "It was stupid and brave and complicated. Your mother made a choice that cost her everything, but it also brought a murderer to justice. It saved other families. Does that make it right? I don't know, but it makes it her choice, and we have to honor it even when we're angry about it." Ethan's face crumpled. "I'm so mad at her, for leaving us, for dying, and that makes me a bad son." Grace moved to sit beside him. "It makes you human. You can love someone and be angry at them at the same time. Those feelings don't cancel each other out." "But I miss her," Ethan sobbed. "I miss her so much, and I'm mad at her, and I love her, and I hate that she's gone, and—" "I know," Grace said, pulling him close. "All of that is okay. All of those feelings are real and valid and okay." They sat together, this makeshift family, letting Ethan cry out months of suppressed rage and grief. Mason joined the crying. Lucas just pressed close to Grace's other side, and Victoria, with tears streaming down her face, said quietly, "I'm mad at her too. Mad at Catherine for not asking for help. Mad at Emily for being in the car that day. Mad at my husband for dying and leaving me alone. Mad at God for taking everyone, and I spent 20 years thinking that anger meant I didn't love them enough. But I was wrong. Anger is love with nowhere to go." The doorbell rang, breaking the moment. Grace went to answer it, expecting a delivery or carolers. Instead, she found Marcus Webb on the doorstep, looking grim. "Is William here?" Marcus asked. "No, he's at the office. Marcus, what's wrong?" "Richard Morse posted bail. 2 hours ago, he's out." Grace felt ice flood her veins. "How?" "His bail was set at $5 million. He made it. Emptied hidden accounts we didn't know about. He's in the wind." And Grace, Marcus hesitated. "Before he disappeared, he made a phone call. We traced it. It was to a number registered to this address." "What? That's impossible. Who would—" Understanding hit them both simultaneously. Marcus pushed past Grace into the house, running toward the living room where Victoria sat with the boys. He pulled out his phone, showing Grace a photo of the phone records. The call had gone to Victoria Ashford's cell phone. "Victoria," Marcus said carefully, "I need you to tell me about your relationship with Richard Morse." Victoria's face drained of color. I've never, don't lie. Not now. Not to them." Marcus gestured to the boys, who were watching with growing alarm. "Did Morse contact you?" Victoria's hands shook. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "He called me 3 weeks ago, before his arrest. He said he had information about Catherine's death, said William was involved, said he could help me win custody." Grace felt betrayed knife through her chest. "You believed him?" "I wanted to believe him. I wanted it to be William's fault because that meant it wasn't mine." Victoria was crying now. "But I never gave him information. I never helped him. When he called today, I didn't even answer." "But you didn't report the call either," Marcus said quietly. "Victoria, a fugitive contacted you and you said nothing. That makes you an accessory." "I didn't know what to do. I thought if I told you you'd think I was involved, that I'd lose the boys forever." Victoria looked at her grandsons with devastation. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was scared and stupid, and—" Ethan stood up slowly. "You talked to the man who killed our mama?" "I didn't know he killed her. Not then. But you helped him anyway." Ethan's voice was cold, distant. "You helped him hurt our family because you wanted to take us away from Daddy." "No, sweetheart, Don't call me sweetheart. You're just like all the others. You lie, and you leave, and you hurt people." Ethan's face was stony, protective walls slamming back into place. "Grace, make her go away." Victoria looked at Grace pleadingly, but Grace's sympathy had limits. "I think you should leave, Victoria. We'll call you when we're ready to talk." "Please, I made a mistake, but I love them." "Then prove it by leaving now," Grace said firmly. "Give them space." After Victoria left, escorted by Marcus, who had more questions, Grace gathered the boys close. They were shaken, the fragile trust they'd rebuilt with their grandmother shattered in minutes. "Is Grandma bad?" Lucas whispered. "No. She's hurt, and hurt people sometimes hurt other people without meaning to." Grace chose her words carefully. "She made a terrible mistake, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It means she's human and flawed and still learning, just like all of us." "Will she come back?" Mason asked. "I don't know. That depends on her, and on your dad, and eventually on whether you boys want her to." When William finally came home at 8 p.m., exhausted from board meetings and restructuring plans, he walked into a house that felt brittle with new trauma. Grace met him at the door and explained everything: Morse's escape, Victoria's phone calls, the betrayal and the hurt. William's face went through shock, rage, exhaustion, and finally a kind of resignation. Of course this would happen, because why would anything be simple? He sat with his sons and let them rage about their grandmother. He called Marcus for updates on Morse's whereabouts. Nothing yet. He increased security at the house. He did all the practical things that needed doing. But later, when the boys were finally asleep and Grace and William sat in the darkened living room by the Christmas tree, he finally let himself break. "I can't do this," he whispered. "I can't keep protecting them from everything. I can't keep all of us safe. I'm failing, Grace, at everything." Grace took his hand. You're not failing. You're surviving an impossible situation. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like the same thing. They sat in silence, two people at the end of their strength, held together only by stubbornness and love, and the knowledge that giving up wasn't an option when children were counting on them. Outside, snow began to fall. Christmas Eve in Aspen, beautiful and cold and full of broken people trying to hold together. Grace thought of Lily, 3 years gone. She thought of Catherine, 9 months dead. She thought of all the ghosts that haunted this house and the people trying to live despite them. "William," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something. Today is the anniversary of my daughter's death. I've been holding it together all day, but I'm not okay. I'm really not okay." William turned to her, and in his eyes she saw understanding. "Do you need to leave again?" "No, I need to stay. I need to be not okay in a place where people see me and love me anyway." Grace's voice shook. "I need to stop running from grief and start living with it. Here, with you and the boys, if that's okay." William pulled her close, and they held each other in the dark. Two broken people holding each other's fractures together, not fixing anything, just being present in the breaking. "It's okay," William said. "It's more than okay. We'll be not okay together." And in that moment, on the worst Christmas Eve of both their lives, something fundamental shifted. They stopped pretending to be fine. They stopped trying to be strong enough to carry everything alone. They became, instead, two people honestly surviving, which was the bravest thing either of them had done. 6 months had passed since Christmas Eve, and spring had transformed the Aspen landscape from frozen white to vibrant green. The Thornton estate, once a mausoleum of grief, now hummed with something resembling life. Not the life it had known before Catherine's death. That version of the family was gone forever, but a new configuration, rebuilt from broken pieces into something unexpectedly whole. Grace stood at the kitchen window watching the 3 boys play in the backyard. They were building something elaborate with sticks and rope, arguing good-naturedly about engineering principles they didn't quite understand. Ethan directed operations with his usual authority. Mason contributed ideas without the desperate need for perfection that had once consumed him. Lucas, now talking freely, narrated their construction with detailed commentary. "They look happy," Victoria said, appearing beside Grace with 2 cups of coffee. She'd moved into the estate's guest house 2 months ago, close enough to be present but far enough to give everyone necessary space. The arrangement worked better than anyone had predicted. "They are happy, most days." Grace accepted the coffee gratefully. Mason still pulls his hair when he's anxious. Ethan still goes silent at school sometimes. Lucas still has nightmares about the accident. But they're healing. Slowly. Victoria nodded, watching her grandsons through the window. "I keep thinking about all the time I wasted being angry. 20 years after Emily died, 9 months after Catherine. All that time I could have spent loving them instead of punishing everyone for my own guilt. You're here now. That's what matters." "Is it enough?" Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "Can you ever make up for that kind of absence?" Grace thought about her own 3-year absence from life after Lily's death. "I don't think it's about making up for lost time. It's about being present in the time that's left, and you are. Every Sunday dinner, every school event, every small moment. You show up now. That's everything." Through the window, they watched William emerge from his study, finally taking the afternoon off as he'd promised. He'd restructured his entire work schedule after the custody hearing, delegating more responsibility and prioritizing presence over productivity. The company was thriving despite, or perhaps because of, his reduced hours. Turned out that a CEO who wasn't drowning in grief made better decisions. He joined the boys in the yard, immediately recruited to hold something while Ethan tied knots. The sound of their laughter carried through the open window, and Grace felt something warm unfold in her chest. Not the same love she'd felt for David, but love nonetheless. Different shape, same substance. He looks at you differently now, Victoria observed quietly. William. The way he looked at Catherine. Grace felt her cheeks warm. It's complicated. Love usually is. Victoria smiled slightly. Catherine would approve, you know. She always said life was for the living, that the best way to honor the dead was to keep choosing joy. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, but you don't have to live in her shadow either. You can be the woman who came after Catherine and be your own person. Both things can be true. Before Grace could respond, Mason ran up to the window, pressing his face against the glass. Grace, come see. We built a bridge and it actually works. Grace laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuine lightness. 6 months ago, she'd been contemplating leaving. Now she was being summoned to admire amateur engineering. Healing was strange that way. It happened in small moments between the larger traumas. She went outside to find William holding one end of their rope bridge while Lucas tested it cautiously. Ethan supervised with serious concentration. Mason bounced with excitement, hair noticeably fuller now that the pulling had decreased. It's structurally sound, William announced in mock-serious tone. I've inspected it personally. Dad doesn't know anything about bridges, Ethan informed Grace confidentially, but we let him pretend. The casual use of Dad still made William's eyes shine with emotion. For months after Catherine's death, the boys had barely spoken to him, and when they did, it was Father or William or nothing at all. The return of Dad had been hard won. Well, as the family's official bridge inspector, I declare this magnificent, Grace said, examining their construction with appropriate seriousness. Lucas tugged her hand. Grace, can we go to the cemetery today? I want to show Mama my new drawings, the happy ones. The question would have devastated Grace 6 months ago. Now she understood it as part of their healing, integrating Catherine's memory into their ongoing lives rather than sealing it away. Of course, sweetheart. Let's all go. An hour later, the whole family stood at Catherine's grave. William, Grace, the 3 boys, and Victoria. They'd brought flowers and Lucas's new journal, filled with drawings of their reconstituted family. The headstone had been updated with a new inscription below Catherine's name. She stood for justice. She died for truth. Her love continues. Hi, Mama, Lucas said, kneeling to place his journal on the grass. I brought you my pictures. See? We're okay now, like you wanted. Ethan stepped forward, unusually vulnerable. Mom, I'm sorry I was so angry at you. Grace explained that you died being brave, not being careless. I get it now. I'm proud of you. Mason added softly, I'm trying not to be so perfect anymore, Mama. Grace says you'd want me to be happy, not perfect. It's really hard, but I'm trying. William cleared his throat, struggling with emotion. Catherine, I want you to know. His voice broke. Grace squeezed his hand, lending strength. I want you to know that Grace has been incredible with the boys, with all of us. And I think I'm falling in love with her, and I hope that's okay. I hope you'd understand that loving her doesn't mean I loved you less. Victoria stepped forward, placing her own flowers. Catherine, I'm so sorry I wasted our last years together, being disappointed instead of being present. I'm trying to do better with your boys, with William, with Grace. I'm trying to be the mother you deserved and the grandmother they need. I hope you can see that. Grace was the last to speak. She knelt beside Lucas's journal, touching the cold marble of Catherine's headstone. I never met you, but I know you through them, through your son's kindness, your husband's integrity, your mother's fierce love. Through the justice you died pursuing and the evidence you left behind that brought your killer to justice. You were extraordinary, and I promise I'll never let them forget that. I'll never try to replace you. But I'll love them with everything I have. Thank you for leaving them for me to find. Thank you for sending me here somehow. I'll take care of them, I promise. They stood together in silence. This patchwork family assembled from loss and choice and stubborn hope. The sun was warm on their faces, and somewhere nearby, a bird sang with careless joy. On the drive home, Mason asked, "Grace, do you think Mama knows we're happy sometimes now?" "I think wherever she is, yes, she knows. And I think she's glad. Even though we love you too." Mason's voice was small, worried about betraying his mother. "Especially because you love me too. Love doesn't divide, remember? It multiplies. You can love your mama and love me." Both things are true. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Grace and William sat on the back porch watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. They'd developed this habit, quiet evenings processing the day, sharing the weight neither had to carry alone anymore. "Grace," William said finally, "what I said at the cemetery, about falling in love with you, I meant it. I know it's complicated, and there's no rush, but I needed you to know." Grace was quiet for a long moment, watching the fireflies pulse with bioluminescent conversation. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm terrified, actually. I lost David and Lily, and the pain almost killed me. Loving you and the boys means risking that kind of loss again, and I don't know if I'm brave enough." "I'm scared too." William reached for her hand. "But I've learned something these past 9 months. Running from pain doesn't work. Trying to control everything doesn't work. The only thing that works is showing up and being honest and letting people see you completely, even the broken parts, especially the broken parts." "When did you get so wise?" "When I hired a nanny who refused to leave when things got hard. When I watched my mother-in-law break open and choose vulnerability over control. When 3 7-year-olds taught me that healing isn't linear and grief doesn't have an expiration date." He smiled slightly. "I had good teachers." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "I can't promise I won't panic, or pull away when it gets scary, or have days when the grief of losing Lily is so big I can barely function. I can't promise those things either. We're both damaged, Grace. We're both carrying ghosts, but maybe that's exactly why this works. We don't need perfect. We just need honest." "Honest," Grace repeated. "I can do honest. Okay, yes. I'm falling in love with you too, and with the boys, and even with Victoria, in a weird way. I'm falling into this family, and it's terrifying, and I'm doing it anyway." William turned to look at her fully, and in his grey-blue eyes she saw a reflection of her own fear and hope tangled together. "So we're doing this, building something new from all these broken pieces?" "We're already doing it, have been since Christmas Eve, since I came back instead of running, since you let me see you completely lost and loved me anyway." Grace smiled through tears. "Yeah, we're doing this." He kissed her then, gentle and tentative, and it felt like coming home to a house you'd never seen before but somehow recognized. Not Catherine's home, not David and Lily's home, but theirs, built from honesty and stubborn hope and the radical choice to love again despite knowing exactly how much it could hurt. Inside, Lucas woke from a dream. Not a nightmare this time, but something gentler. In the dream, his mother had been smiling. She'd said, "Take care of each other. That's how you take care of me." When he padded to the window and saw William and Grace on the porch, holding each other in the firefly-lit darkness, he understood what his mother meant. He picked up his journal and drew the scene, 2 people choosing love, surrounded by small lights in the darkness. He titled it, "After the Storm," because that's what they were now. Not the family they'd been before the storm, but the family that emerged after, different, scarred, but whole in their own complicated way. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Sometimes the hardest thing about grief isn't the losing, it's the living afterward. This story reminds us that healing doesn't mean forgetting those we've loved and lost. It means learning to carry their memory while still opening our hearts to new connections. Grace almost ran from the Thornton family because loving again felt like betraying Lily. William nearly drowned in guilt, thinking Catherine's death was his fault. Victoria spent 20 years punishing herself for a tragedy she didn't cause. But they all learned the same truth. Running from pain just means carrying it alone, and carrying it alone is the heaviest burden of all. The most profound act of courage isn't being unbreakable. It's breaking in front of people who love you anyway, and choosing to stay when every instinct screams to run. This Christmas Eve, they stopped pretending to be fine and started being honestly broken together. And that vulnerability, that willingness to be seen in their pain, became the foundation for real healing. Because family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, especially on the hard days, especially when you're falling apart, especially when staying feels impossible. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and staying present for someone who needed you? What helped you decide? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.